We were having Thanksgiving dinner at my mother-in-law Catherine's house. Everyone was exchanging gifts, and I realized I'd been forgotten again. My mother-in-law laughed and said, "Oh, we forgot about you," as she opened my gift. My husband, David, laughed along with them, and I smiled back, trying to stay composed even though my heart was aching. It was a feeling I had grown all too familiar with. After 6 years of marriage to David, I had always felt like an outsider in his family. Every time I attended a family gathering, I felt like someone who didn't belong there. I'm Evelyn, 35 years old, a woman who has spent 6 years building a life with David, the man I once thought was all I needed to feel complete. We met at a small cafe in Rochester, where I worked as a barista to help pay off student loans, and he was a regular with a warm smile and funny stories about his job as a programmer. I loved him for that warmth, for the way he made me feel special on the days when I felt like nothing more than a shadow drifting through life. But after we got married, that special feeling started to fade, not because he changed, but because of his family, people who never once saw me as part of their world. I'm not the kind of person who clings to fairy tales. At 35, I've learned that life isn't always fair, and not everyone will welcome you just because you try your best. But when I entered David's family, I still carried a bit of naive hope that eventually they would accept me. I was wrong. His mother, Catherine, was the center of the family, a tall, slender woman with meticulously dyed blonde hair and piercing eyes that seemed to look right through you without saying a word. She lived in a large house in the Connecticut suburbs, where everything was arranged perfectly, from the paintings on the wall to the silver spoons on the dinner table. She loved telling stories about the old days, when David was little, when their family was a tight-knit unit with no room for outsiders like me. Catherine never said outright that she hated me, but she had a way of making me feel small without raising her voice. I remember the first time I visited her house after we got engaged. I wore the nicest dress I owned, a simple blue one that David once complimented, and brought a jar of homemade strawberry jam, hoping to make a good impression. She glanced at me, smiled faintly, and said, "Oh, you made this yourself." I didn't think people still did things like that these days. David laughed, thinking it was a compliment, but I saw her eyes filled with veiled contempt behind a polite smile. That jar of jam was shoved into a kitchen cabinet and never opened. From that moment on, I knew I would always be the extra in her eyes. David's two sisters, Sarah and Lily, weren't much better. Sarah, 38, the eldest, was a confident woman with short, auburn-dyed hair and a sharp, cutting voice. She worked in real estate and constantly talked about her big deals, as if trying to prove she was the most important person in the family. Lily, 33, 2 years younger than me, had a softer appearance with naturally curly long hair and a sweet smile, but that smile was never for me. They were like Catherine's shadows, always by her side, always agreeing with her, always finding subtle ways to remind me that I didn't belong. One time at a Christmas party, Sarah accidentally spilled red wine on my dress and laughed out loud, saying, "Oh dear, Evelyn, you're so clumsy. Let me grab a napkin for you." Lily stood next to her, giggling behind her hand, while Catherine simply raised an eyebrow and said, "Be careful next time. That wine's expensive." David was the one I relied on the most, but he never stood up for me. I had told him how excluded I felt, about the nights I cried silently in bed because of his mother's passive-aggressive remarks or the way his sisters made me feel invisible. He would just pat my shoulder and chuckle, "You're being too sensitive, Evelyn. My mom's just joking." Sarah and Lily, too. They don't mean any harm. I wanted to scream that it wasn't a joke, that I wasn't imagining the feeling of being pushed to the edge every time I walked into their house. But I stayed silent because I loved him, because I was afraid that if I pushed too hard, I would lose him. I kept telling myself I could endure it, that as long as I had David, I could make it through. But every time he laughed with his mother, every time he left me to face their contempt alone, I felt that love being slowly eaten away. 6 years had passed, and I had tried my best to fit in. I attended every family gathering, brought homemade dishes, and tried to join in their conversations. But every time, I was met with forced smiles, vague comments, and the cold, undeniable feeling that I wasn't welcome. Catherine loved hosting big events like Thanksgiving, Christmas, and birthdays. and she always turned them into a stage to show off her love for her family. But I was never part of that show. I remember one time during Lily's birthday party, she stood up to make a toast. "I'm proud of my children, David, Sarah, Lily, you are everything to me." She glanced past me like I wasn't even there, and everyone applauded while I sat silently, gripping my water glass tightly, swallowing the feeling of being forgotten. I began to realize that I wasn't just an outsider in their eyes. I was in David's eyes too. He never defended me, never told his mother she was out of line, never brought me into conversations he knew I couldn't follow. He left me alone in the moments I needed him most, and each time, my heart cracked a little more. I had tried changing myself, dressing better, talking less, smiling more, but nothing changed the way they saw me. Eventually, I lost all hope. It would be no surprise if I was once again pushed aside and invisible at the upcoming Thanksgiving. That's why I decided to prepare a gift that would leave everyone, especially Catherine, speechless. This year's Thanksgiving at Catherine's house unfolded like every other year, a carefully choreographed performance, with her as the director and star. Her suburban Connecticut home looked like it came straight out of an interior design magazine. Tiny lanterns lined the walkway, dry leaf garlands wrapped around the staircase, and the scent of roasted turkey mixed with cinnamon drifted from the fireplace. I walked in with David, carrying a homemade pumpkin pie I had spent the entire morning perfecting, clinging to the faint hope that it might help me earn a few points. Catherine glanced at the pie and said with a flat tone, "Looks fine," before turning to embrace David tightly. "My boy is finally here. I've been waiting all day." Sarah and Lily appeared right behind her, throwing their arms around David like he'd just returned from war, while I received nothing more than a bland nod and a smile that never reached their eyes. Dinner began with the family's usual excitement. Catherine sat at the head of the table, proudly raving about her family recipe roasted turkey and a bowl of stuffing. No one makes better than Mom. Sarah talked about a new apartment she'd just sold in Hartford, her voice full of pride. The buyer offered even more than expected. "I really do have a knack for this." Lily chimed in with a giggle. "You've got to teach me your tricks." "I just bought a new sofa and I'm broke." David nodded and added, "Lily, you should see that apartment. It's really upscale." I sat there quietly, picking at my mashed potatoes, and tried to interject. "The pumpkin pie today is my mom's old recipe. Hope you'll enjoy it." But no one responded. Catherine gave a half-hearted hum, then turned to David. "Do you want more stuffing, sweetheart? I made a special batch just for you." I lowered my head, feeling like I'd just spoken into a void. After the plates were cleared, Catherine clapped her hands with a glowing smile. "Before dessert, we have a little surprise." This was her signature Thanksgiving tradition, an unofficial gift-giving ceremony that she always turned into a showcase of her affection for the family. I used to think it was just a fun gesture, but over the years, I realized it was her way of reminding me where I stood, outside the circle. She started with Sarah, handing her a shiny brown leather handbag. "This one's for Sarah. I know you love simple yet classy things." Sarah squealed, "You're the best, Mom." This must have cost a fortune. Next came Lily with a luxury skincare set. "Lily, you need to take better care of yourself. I picked this out just for you." Lily hugged her tightly, beaming. "You know me so well, thank you, Mom." Then came David, my husband. Catherine handed him a small wooden box. Inside was a wristwatch. "David, I thought this suited you. It reminds me of your father's." David laughed heartily. "You're the best, Mom." "I love it." I sat there, hands tightly clasped under the table, clinging to the naive hope that this year might be different. But when Catherine returned to her seat with no gift in hand, I knew I had been left out again. She looked at me, her lips curling into a mocking smile. "Oh, Evelyn, we really forgot about you." Sarah covered her mouth, giggling, while Lily raised an eyebrow as if it was the best joke of the evening. And then David, my husband, the one I had hoped would stand up for me, laughed too, his shoulders shaking as if my pain was some kind of comedy. I felt the blood rush to my face, my heart tightening in my chest, but I didn't cry. I smiled instead, my voice calm but icy. "It's okay, Catherine." Being forgotten and pushed aside was part of what I expected. I know very well I'm nothing in this family. That's why I brought a gift, one very special and very well deserved. The room froze. Catherine furrowed her brow, the smile on her lips stiffening. Sarah and Lily stopped laughing, glancing at each other as if sensing something was wrong. David tilted his head and asked, "What do you mean by that?" I didn't answer right away. I stood slowly, walked over to my handbag in the corner of the room, and pulled out a small box wrapped in deep blue paper, a gift I had prepared for months, not to please them, but to expose them. I turned back and placed it in front of Catherine, my voice steady and sharp. "Go ahead, Catherine. This is my gift to you." Catherine picked up the box, her hands slightly trembling, her eyes scanning the room like she suspected a trap. "What are you doing, Evelyn?" she asked, her voice lowered, but I just nodded. "Open it. You'll like it." She tore the wrapping slowly, as if trying to prolong the moment to keep control. Inside was a thick bundle of documents, neatly tied with a red ribbon. She frowned, pulled them out, and as she read the first line, her face went pale. I sat down, arms crossed, watching every small shift in her expression, from confidence to confusion, then to panic. Sarah leaned over. "Mom, what is it?" Lily snatched a page, and her eyes widened as she read a few lines. David looked at me and asked, "Evelyn, what did you do?" I took a sip of water, my voice even. "That's evidence, Catherine. Evidence of how you've been falsifying income reports for your interior design company for the past 6 years. You've been evading taxes, hiding money, and leaving behind a mess I spent months untangling from invoices, emails, and bank accounts you thought were secret." Catherine dropped the bundle on the table, her hands shaking. "Where did you get all this?" she stammered. I gave a faint smile. "I had time, Catherine. Time that you and this family spent pretending I didn't exist." Sarah flipped through the pages quickly, her voice shaky. "Mom, this is real. Your signature is on everything." Lily whispered, "Oh my God, if the IRS sees this." I had been preparing for this moment for a long time. A few months ago, I overheard Catherine bragging on the phone to a friend about how she had been cutting costs for her company, a small interior design business she proudly called her family legacy. I was curious and started going through old invoices she had once asked me to sort when I helped her clean out the office. From there, I dug deeper, emails, financial reports, even hired a friend who's an accountant to cross-check everything. The result was a thick file proving she had embezzled tens of thousands of dollars, faked losses to avoid taxes, and kept everything in an offshore account not even her family knew about. I looked at her and spoke slowly. "Did you think I wouldn't notice, Catherine? After 6 years of being treated like I don't matter, I've learned to observe very closely." Catherine looked up, eyes bloodshot. "You're making this up. This is fake." But her voice wavered, and I knew she was terrified. Sarah muttered, "Mom, these are real figures. There are transaction dates and everything." Lily held up a page, her face white as paper. "Mom, this could send you to jail." David finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Evelyn, why would you do this?" I turned to him, my eyes unwavering. "Because you never defended me, David. Because your family treated me like I was invisible. And because I'm done being treated like garbage." The room fell silent, broken only by Catherine's shaky breathing and the rustle of paper in Sarah's hands. I knew I had just dropped a bomb, and they hadn't even begun to grasp how big it was going to explode. Catherine's dining room, once glowing with warm yellow lights and lively laughter, was now heavy with tension, like the air just before a storm. The folder I had placed in front of her lay still, the cold white pages catching the light from the crystal chandelier above, like a silent accusation that could not be denied. Catherine stared at them, her hands trembling as she clutched the top page, as if letting go would cause everything to collapse. Her face had gone pale, her lips pressed into a tight line, but I could see the panic in her eyes, the look of someone who had just been stripped bare in front of the world. Sarah and Lily, once so confident and sharp-tongued, now couldn't hide their confusion. Sarah flipped through the pages quickly, her fingers shaking as she whispered, "Mom, this can't be real, right?" Lily, sitting next to her, clutched another page, her voice cracking. "Mom, is this an offshore account? You've been hiding money overseas?" I sat still, arms crossed over my chest, watching each of their reactions. Catherine finally looked up, her bloodshot eyes fixed on me as if she could burn a hole through me. You. How dare you pull this stunt in my house? She growled, but her voice cracked, stripping the words of any power. I raised an eyebrow, my tone calm and sharp. Your house? Oh, Catherine, I think the IRS will soon have something to say about who owns what. She flinched, slamming her hand down on the table, causing the wine glasses to tremble. You're making this up. It's all fake. You don't have any real proof. But the desperation in her voice only made me more certain she knew she had lost. Sarah cut in, her voice rising in panic. Mom, stop. These are financial reports. There are figures, and your signature is on them. How do you explain this? She held up a sheet pointing at the dates and transfer amounts, tens of thousands of dollars wired overseas under the label of business expenses. Lily joined in, her face ghostly pale. Mom, this could get the whole family in trouble, not just you. Catherine turned to her daughters, trying to regain control. Girls, calm down. I'll handle this. She jabbed her finger at me, is just trying to tear us apart. But the looks on Sarah and Lily's faces weren't blindly trusting anymore. They were filled with doubt, and I knew the seeds I had planted were starting to sprout. David, the man I had once loved enough to endure all this for, had sat silent the entire time. He looked at me, then at his mother, then down at the table, gripping the watch Catherine had just given him like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. I waited for him to stand up, say something, anything to defend me or at least acknowledge that I wasn't wrong. But he just sat there, his eyes hollow, and when he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse as if strangled. Evelyn, what are you doing? Why did you take it this far? I turned to him, my heart clenching, not from pain, but from disappointment. Too far, David. You think this is too far? I spent 6 years being treated like garbage by your family, and you never once stood up for me. This isn't too far. This is what you forced me to do. Catherine seized the moment to regain her footing. She shot up from her seat, pointing at me, her voice shaking with fury. See, David? She's the troublemaker. She's jealous of our family and wants to destroy everything. She made up these documents to get revenge. She turned to Sarah and Lily, pleading, Girls, don't believe her. Everything I did was for you, for this family. But Sarah was no longer listening. She stood up, still holding the folder of evidence, her voice cold. If this is fake, then why can't you explain where the money went? Why do you have a Cayman account no one knew about? Lily nodded, her voice quiet but resolute. Mom, I don't believe you anymore. This isn't fake. There are emails here that you sent to your accountant. David finally stood, but not to defend me. He walked over to Catherine, his voice trembling. Mom, please tell me this isn't real. Tell me Evelyn is wrong. Catherine grabbed his hand, her tone soft and coddling like she was soothing a child. David, my son, I did nothing wrong. She's just trying to stir up trouble. You believe me, don't you? I looked at him, waiting to see who he would choose. But he didn't look at me. He nodded at his mother, his voice barely a whisper. Yeah, Mom, I believe you. My heart didn't break because I still loved him. It broke because I finally understood he would never change. He chose his family, just like he always had, and left me standing there with a truth he refused to face. Catherine laughed triumphantly, thinking she had won. See, Evelyn? David knows who I am. You've lost. But she didn't even get to enjoy her so-called victory before Sarah spoke up, her voice sharp as a blade. No, Mom. I don't believe you anymore. If Evelyn is right, then you lied to all of us, not just her. Lily nodded. I want you to tell the truth. If you don't, I'll call a lawyer myself to investigate. Catherine turned to her daughters, her face twisted in rage. You're turning your backs on your own mother? After everything I've done for you. Sarah shot back without hesitation. What you've done for us. Or for yourself. I stood up, feeling as though a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Catherine, you don't have to believe me. But the IRS will. I sent them a copy this morning, along with a note that you should prepare a lawyer. The room went completely silent. Catherine screamed, You're lying. But her eyes betrayed her. She knew I wasn't bluffing. Sarah dropped the folder on the table, her voice shaking. Mom, if this ends up with the police, Lily turned away, covering her face. I don't want to be involved in this anymore. David looked at me. For the first time that night, he truly looked at me, and I saw confusion in his eyes. Evelyn, you actually did it? I nodded. Yes, David. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. Catherine collapsed into her chair, her hands cradling her head as she muttered, You've destroyed me. You've destroyed my family. But I knew the truth. She had destroyed herself a long time ago. I had only flipped the switch. I walked away from the table, a sense of relief flooding through me. They could scream, blame me, say whatever they wanted, but I was no longer the quiet outsider they could trample on. I had made them confront themselves, and now there was no going back. Catherine turned to David, her last remaining hope. David, my son, say something. Tell her to stop. You can't let me go through this. He looked at his mother, then at me, his hands trembling as if being torn in two. I stood still, waiting, not because I wanted him to choose me, but because I wanted him to face the truth himself. He took a deep breath, his voice hoarse. Mum, if Evelyn is right, what did you do with the family's money? With Dad's money? Catherine flinched, her hands dropping to her lap. David, you don't believe me? I did everything for you, for all of you. But he shook his head and stepped back. Mom, I don't know anymore. I don't know who to believe. That's when Charles, David's father, walked in. He had gone to the basement to get more wine, unaware of the storm that had erupted upstairs. He paused at the doorway, taking in the chaos. Catherine hunched over, Sarah and Lily with their heads in their hands, David frozen in place, and me, the only one standing calm in the eye of the storm. What's going on? He asked, his voice deep and commanding. Sarah handed him the file, her voice trembling. Dad, read this. Mom embezzled money, hid it overseas, and lied to the IRS. Charles took the folder, flipping through the pages, his face shifting from shock to fury. He stopped at the final page, the one with the offshore account statement, and looked up at Catherine. Catherine, is this real? She stammered. Charles, don't listen to her. She made this up to ruin me. But Charles wasn't David. He wasn't so easily manipulated. He slammed the file down on the table, his voice booming. Stop lying. That's your signature, your account number. You took money from me, from this family. What for? Catherine cowered. I just wanted to keep the company, Charles. I didn't want to lose everything. He let out a bitter laugh. Lose everything? You just did lose everything. You think the IRS is going to let this slide? He turned to me, his eyes not thankful, but no longer hostile. Evelyn, you did this on your own? I nodded. Yes. I was tired of being treated like I didn't matter. Catherine screamed, Charles, you can't believe her. She's tearing this family apart. But he cut her off. No, Catherine. You tore this family apart. I'm calling a lawyer first thing tomorrow, and not to save you. She collapsed into the chair, clutching her chest, muttering, You're all betraying me. Sarah turned away. You betrayed us first. Lily whispered, I don't want to see you again. David looked at me, his voice soft. Evelyn, you didn't have to do this, but I cut him off. David, you're wrong. I did have to do this for me, not for you or your family. I turned to him, my gaze unwavering. 6 years, David. 6 years I waited for you to stand by me, to protect me, and you never did. I can't live with a husband who chooses his family over his wife, especially when that family is this rotten. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. Don't. I'm done. I slid off my wedding ring, the simple silver band he gave me on our wedding day, once a symbol of hope, now just a meaningless object. I placed it on the table in front of him, the sound of metal on wood ringing like a final period. He stared at it, face pale. Evelyn, you're serious? I nodded, more serious than I've ever been. Catherine let out a bitter laugh, her voice weak but still venomous. You think walking away means you've won? You're nothing. I turned to her and smiled. I'm the one who just made you lose everything, Catherine. I think that's enough. Charles nodded at me, his voice deep and calm. Go, Evelyn. I'll take care of this. I didn't need a second invitation. I picked up my purse and walked out of that house without looking back. Behind me were the sounds of Catherine sobbing, Sarah and Lily arguing with her, and David calling my name. 2 months later, I heard that Catherine had been officially investigated by the IRS. Her company had gone bankrupt, her accounts were frozen, and Charles had filed for divorce, demanding back all the assets she had embezzled. Sarah and Lily had cut off contact with her. As for David, he sent me dozens of messages, apologizing, begging me to come back. Evelyn, I was wrong. I understand now how you felt. Please give me another chance. I read his last message on the balcony of my new apartment in Rochester, where I had started over. A small apartment with large windows overlooking the river, where I kept a few potted plants and hung the paintings I made myself. I smiled, deleted the message, and tossed my phone onto the couch. I didn't need him anymore, not his family, not their approval. I stepped outside, breathing in the crisp winter air, feeling freedom rush through every vein in my body. Catherine once called me a nobody, but I proved her wrong. I was the one who stood up, the one who won, not by fitting into their family, but by breaking free of it to reclaim myself. The next day, I received a letter from Charles, a short thank you note, and noticed that he had left me a small share of the divorce settlement, because you showed me the crimes my wife committed. I didn't need the money, but I kept it like a badge of victory. From the ashes of that broken marriage, I rebuilt my life strong, free, and no longer the outsider.